complaint begins. Defendant Sean Combs, along with his
Let's get to it. Sit tight. It's up from here.
Drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl at an after-party following the 2000 Video Music Awards. Another celebrity stood by and watched as Combs and Carter took turns assaulting the minor. Many others were present at the after-party but did nothing to stop the assault. Combs had been allowed for years to conduct himself in this manner without any consequences. He believes he is above the law. He is not. His close friend Sean Carter has been with Combs during many such instances described herein. Both perpetrators must face justice. So that seems to suggest that Sean Carter, Jay-Z, was not only present or participated in this alleged, what is essentially a crime, but for other instances. And that's really interesting. That's why I bring up this idea of, could he be hit with more lawsuits if you take these allegations as true? Now, the complaint goes on to say, Combs and Carter were not simply occasional collaborators in the music industry. The two men developed a close friendship that has been well documented from the late 1990s to the present. Together, they attended countless music industry events for each other's business ventures, parties, and after-parties. Indeed, the two are apparently so close that Combs stated in 2023 that Carter is the only person, other than Combs' mother, who is allowed to call him by his legal first name of Sean. In 2000, near the height of their fame, power,
Wow! They were that deep, nasty.
in New York City. Afterwards, Combs hosted an after-party for many of the most famous celebrities in the music and entertainment industries, including Carter, which is where the events alleged in this complaint occurred. And by the way, as an aside, let me also say real quick, it's not just us here at Long Crime that have been covering these.
Son, I ain't gonna hold you. I think Shorty's lying because the father's now saying shit like, I heard him say over the weekend that he don't remember picking her up and all of this nonsense. Honest Gang saying Jay-Z's involved. I don't know. I don't know if Jay-Z's involved.
OUND news.
I can't front. It seemed cap. The father now say he don't remember.
Lawyers claim prosecutors allegedly unlawfully obtained his jail cell notes, including attorney-client privileged information. Remember that? Well, based on every source that Ground News found on reporting on this, the left are clearly dominating coverage, making this a potential blind spot for more conservative news consumers. But it's not just about who's covering the story, it's also about how they're covering it. Well, Ground News calculated the majority of these articles come from highly credible sources, so you can instantly see which headlines are more objective and which might be skewing the facts. The bottom line here, don't let someone else's spin shape your understanding of the truth. Just head to ground.news/sidebar or scan the QR code right there and use our link to save 50% off of the top tier Vantage plan, which offers unlimited access. It's the same plan that we've been using. So thank you to Greg for the event, but you walked around.
When he corroborated the plaintiff's claims, then that would be something that would really be a game changer. But the plaintiff alone, I think, is going to face some credibility issues, especially when you have Jay-Z. I mean, Diddy, the allegations are pretty widespread, but there haven't been similar allegations about Jay-Z, and that really sets his case apart.
I believe you're referring to Celebrity B, this female celebrity who was in that room. Do you think this person has settled maybe her claims with Tony Busby? What do I mean by that? If she was present, I imagine that Tony Busby might have reached out to her and said, listen, I can file a lawsuit against you too because of you being there. You were present. You were a witness. Maybe. Do you think that this is a person who maybe already settled her claim so that she would be a cooperating witness for Tony Busby's case? I mean, tell me how you think that might work.
If you use Walmart self-checkouts, watch this immediately.
Now to the class action lawsuit against Walmart. The company agreeing to pay $45 million to settle that lawsuit. ABC's Alexis.
That would be a brilliant move if that's what Busby did, because otherwise he is making really, the worst, the harshest kinds of allegations, and he's signing his name to it. I mean, he referred to his client vetting a demand letter. Well, sure. The client is supposed to vet the demand letter for in terms of the factual allegations, but the legal allegations, the legal import of that is in the province of the attorney. So you can't necessarily just hide behind your client. But were he to have made a deal with Celebrity B, that would really backstop.
Who is Celebrity B? They won't reveal this chick, man. Why?
But you think Celebrity B would take any kind of deal where they have to testify and say, yeah, I was in a room while a 13-year-old was being sexually assaulted, and yeah, I'm not being sued now because I settled my claims. I mean, either way, if this is true and this person knows who Celebrity B was, I can't even imagine, even if they were a cooperating witness of some kind, that they don't look really, really bad from this.
I totally agree. I think that premise is dubious for the reasons you mentioned. I mean, Celebrity B, while it would be a terrible thing not to have reported these crimes, and they're very serious crimes if in fact they were committed, but it's unclear what, if any, civil liability Celebrity B would not have or would have for not being a good Samaritan. I mean, I think the statute on that, to the extent that there's any liability for not reporting, had long since been passed. So I don't think she would have any legal or factual incentive to make such a deal. I think her incentive would be not to cooperate at all and to deny that she witnessed any such thing.
Right. Let's get into a little bit of this legal warfare that's going on. What do you make of the fact that Busby revealed Jay-Z as Celebrity A based on what he says was a failure to meet on mediation, that this was a standard demand letter? What do you make of his version of events?
Well, I have one problem. I mean, he's right in the sense, as you know, Jesse, that it's standard and it's smart to give a potential defendant an opportunity to settle prior to filing a lawsuit, because at that point, the plaintiff would have kind of detonated the grenade and forced the defendant in a position where he almost has to fight. Whereas when you send a demand letter and say that you're interested to talk and settle the matter on a confidential basis, that is an appropriate standard thing to do, assuming that you have a legitimate claim. Where I think he's on weaker ground is where he is litigating this in the media and making statements defending himself. One of my mentors always told me, never defend yourself, defend your client, and always remember that you're representing yourself. And the only time you answer any allegations against yourself is when a judge is specifically asking you to. And I think that Busby crossed that line in the sense that he's now giving press conferences talking about himself and his own actions when he should be representing his client. That's just my opinion, but I think it's unwise for him to get into a PR war.
Do you think that this rises to the level of extortion, as Jay-Z's claims? Because let me read you a portion from one of their filings. To coerce Mr. Carter into compliance, plaintiff and attorney Busby imposed an arbitrary deadline in their extortionate demand letter, warning Mr. Carter that they would take a different course if he did not agree to a confidential mediation to resolve this delicate, important matter. Without even waiting for the deadline provided by the extortionate demand letter to pass, attorney Busby posted on social media that he intended to file a lawsuit naming Mr. Carter and attaching the extortionate demand letter to punish Mr. Carter for seeking redress from a court. All along, Mr. Carter refused to bow to attorney Busby's scheme. Faced with the choice to either pay an exorbitant sum to silence plaintiff's wild, false allegations of sexual assault, risking irreparable harm to his reputation, family, career, and livelihood, or face a barrage of baseless lawsuits and financial ruin, Mr. Carter stood his ground. On November 18, 2024, Mr. Carter filed a complaint against attorney Busby and his law firm for his extortionate conduct. So a little bit what you said about the media, but what do you take about that version of events?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with Busby giving a deadline. You really have to give a deadline. Otherwise, there's no incentive for the potential defendant to ever respond. But what the problem in this scenario is that he didn't give the defendant the full benefit of the deadline. In other words, if you give somebody a deadline, respond by December 27th, you shouldn't say anything until December 27th, unless the defendant has already said, no, we're not.
John Daniel, that's what I'm saying. One day they're gonna have to let us know who Celebrity B is. Celebrity B is nasty work. They watched all of this that they say. If it's true. That's if it's true.
You know, I think if you've got to be true to your word. If you want to give them a deadline, let them have until the deadline.
Also, I want your thoughts real quick on something else, Ben. You know, the idea that Jane Doe should have to reveal her identity, and whether or not the court will say she has to reveal her identity, and B, is that the proper move from Jay-Z's camp to do? So there's two sides to this. Busby says in part, sensitive, details of sexual assault, her having to reveal that is incredibly traumatic. The media attention on this case would create a chilling effect from other people coming forward. Combs has made threats of violence in the past, so her, revealing herself could be problematic. Jay-Z argues, look, I have a right to know who my accuser is, to research that person. People won't come over with helpful evidence that could help my case, my defense, if they don't know who this person is. The public has a right to know who she is. She is the one who filed the lawsuit, put her credibility into issue by voluntarily filing a lawsuit. Who's right?
I have fairly strong opinions on this since I've had several clients who've been in that position, and I think that Jay-Z's counsel is absolutely right on this. If you make serious allegations of this nature, you shouldn't be able to hide behind the shield of anonymity. These are incredibly serious. I mean, to me, I would rather be accused of murder than rape of a child. If you were going to make these kinds of allegations, I think you have to
I agree.
reveal. Now, exceptions for that are the ones you mentioned. If this victim or alleged victim
Hold on, let's rewind
were
that
still
a
under
bit.
And whether or not the court will say she has to reveal her
Listen.
identity, and B, is that the proper move from Jay-Z's camp to do? So there's two sides to this. Busby says in part, sensitive, details of sexual assault, her having to reveal that is incredibly traumatic. The media attention on this case would create a chilling effect from other people coming forward. Combs has made threats of violence in the past, so her, revealing herself could be problematic. Jay-Z argues, look, I have a right to know who my accuser is, to research that person. People won't come over with helpful evidence that could help my case, my defense, if they don't know who this person is. The public has a right to know who she is. She is the one who filed the lawsuit, put her credibility into issue by voluntarily filing a lawsuit. Who's right?
Jay-Z.
I have fairly strong opinions on this since I've had several clients who've been in that position, and I think that Jay-Z's counsel is absolutely right on this. If you make serious allegations of this nature, you shouldn't be able to hide behind the shield of anonymity.
Facts.
These are incredibly serious. I mean, to me, I would rather be accused of murder.
Happy holidays, Jen. Thank you.
If you were going to make these kinds of allegations, I think you have to be revealed. Now, exceptions for that are the ones you mentioned. If this victim or alleged victim were still underage, I think there'd be a strong argument for protecting what would be a child. But this is an adult woman at this point. Second exception is the one you also referenced, the possibility of violence. Now that's quite real, and I think that's something the judge would have to weigh. Although I don't think there's any indication that any threats have emanated from Jay-Z's camp.
Right.
But absent something like that, a real showing of potential danger should the plaintiff's name be revealed, I think it's absolutely fair for the accuser's name to be mentioned. And the reason why, I think also in terms of the fairness, is that if that person's name is out there, then people may come forward. If there have been I had a case where we did a similar thing, that our client was accused of civilly of sexual battery, and we moved the court to have that adult plaintiff named. The court granted that, and when that happened, we got all kinds of communications from the public at large saying, we know this person. And it turned out that person had a lot of skeletons in his closet. And frankly, we would not have had access to that but for, that information being out there.
I'm a little disappointed where I'm at right now.
See, that's the thing. This is getting nasty because the people, I think Jay-Z paid them people off, man. Their stories change fast.
A lot of research.
Or they asking them to show their face and they scared to.
I think in terms of fairness, the presumption should be that a plaintiff should be named.
What does all this mean for Jay-Z? And could there be suits? Could this lead to criminal charges? So there is a lot to break down with this. But here's the thing. I'm not going to talk about this by myself. I have a special guest, and I have a special guest who is actually with me. First time in studio, somebody who all of you will recognize if you follow us here on Sidebar. We usually have him on Zoom, but now we have him here in person. Renowned criminal defense attorney to the stars, Bradford Cohen is with us. Bradford, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. Yeah. So we haven't had a chance to talk about the fact that Jay-Z's been named as a defendant in this civil suit. What's your reaction to that?
So, it's interesting because, obviously this civil suit was coming for a while.
Yep.
And there was some talk between Busby and Jay-Z's lawyers. I think both Busby and Jay-Z's lawyers are really alphas. So when you have that
what gives you that idea?
When you have that combination, and listen, there's many criminal defense attorneys that I put in under that kind of dome of alphas. And when you have two that are going at each other, especially when it's contentious, like this type of accusation, I think it's not a surprise what's going on. Like in terms of them investigating Busby throwing bombs their way. So I don't see this going away very quickly. And I think that it's not a shock that it came because you knew that Jay-Z and Puffy were close. And when it said Celebrity 1 in the original complaint, I kind of assumed that it was going to be someone like a Jay-Z. That doesn't mean that those accusations have any bearing whatsoever if they're true or not true, because we haven't seen all of the evidence. It's just the accusations. And as you know, Busby is one of those lawyers that he likes the show, he likes the circus. So I don't know if you can take everything as true in terms of the actual complaint itself, in terms of investigating it. It's just a hard thing to tell because Busby does that. That's what he's known for.
I've seen legal analysts talk about this, and they say Tony Busby, renowned Texas lawyer, he wouldn't go forward with a case like this because when he first came onto the scene in the Diddy case, he said he's gotten an intake of 3,000 calls, but he's been selective about who he's chosen to represent, that he wouldn't represent this Jane Doe in a case against Sean Combs or Jay-Z unless he felt he had the evidence. What do you think about that?
I think when you're in that community and you're friends with a lot of lawyers, they'll always back you up and say, oh, he wouldn't take a case that was BS. Who knows? We won't know until the evidence starts coming out. Jay-Z seems very, very adamant that this didn't take place. He says, go to the police, go talk to the police. If you think that there's something that happens and file a police report.
I'll get to that in a second. He can't settle at this point, right? I mean, you tell me. Yeah. Some people say, I'm going to fight this, and then they end up settling. But look what happened with Sean Combs. He settled the Cassandra Ventura lawsuit the day after it was filed. They did a whole episode on was it a mistake for him to even allow that to be filed. At this point, he can't risk settling because it'll look like an admission, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things going on. So some inside baseball. When Sean Combs was negotiating that, I spoke to some lawyers that were involved, and I was like, even if the accusations are false, there's two ways to go about these cases. Either one, you do the economic analysis, right? What is this going to cost me? Where is it going? How much am I going to lose? All these different things, even if it's false, right? How much are the attorneys going to cost me, right? And then you decide whether or not you want to do that. The second way to that, and I call this the Sparta route, that's number two. The Sparta route is you go all out and go to war. Right. There's no in between there. Mr. Miyagi always says, walk on one side of the road, you're safe. Walk on the other side of the road, you're safe. Walk in the middle, you get squashed. And that's what happened to Sean Combs, right? So he kept saying, like, listen, I'm not paying. This is Sparta. I'm not paying. I'm not going to pay her a dime. Then she files, and then the next day he pays. That's the worst case scenario because then it's just open season on Sean Combs. And that's what happened. So Jay-Z should learn something from that. His lawyers are not the type that would say, okay, let's settle now. I don't see that ever happening. Yeah. I think he will spend whatever it takes to make sure that his name is cleared, or at least make the attempt to make sure his name is cleared. And I don't think there is a budget to that.
I want to read you something. So this is something from the amended complaint. It reads, Combs has been allowed for years